My name is Daniel. I never thought I'd be here, sitting alone in my office at 3 a.m., scrolling through months of bank statements, emails, and tiny clues I never wanted to believe existed. For 10 years, Emily and I built a life that looked perfect from the outside. The house, the careers, the vacations, the photos of smiling faces posted online. But beneath the surface, something shifted. And now I was staring into the void of those changes, trying to understand where everything went wrong. It started small, subtle. She grew distant. At first, I blamed it on work. She'd recently gotten promoted, taking on a bigger role at her marketing firm. Late nights, conference calls at odd hours, client dinners that sometimes ran past midnight. I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to believe it was temporary. But then there were the phone calls she wouldn't take around me, the texts she would delete, the guarded answers whenever I asked simple questions. One evening, I saw her sitting on the patio with her phone in hand, whispering. The second she noticed me, she jumped up like a guilty teenager. She forced a smile and mumbled something about work. Work, always work. I didn't say anything then. I nodded, but a small cold knot formed in my stomach. Over the following weeks, my mind became a battlefield between suspicion and trust. I told myself that I was overthinking, that after a decade of marriage, you don't jump to conclusions. But deep down, something told me the truth was uglier than I was willing to face. Then came the first real crack. One Saturday afternoon, while Emily was out, I noticed her laptop sitting open on the dining table. I had never snooped before, but that day, my hands moved before my conscience could stop them. Her email was open. Not work emails, personal ones. There was one thread that immediately caught my eye. It was labeled, Legal Consult, Confidential. I felt my throat tighten. My pulse hammered in my ears as I clicked it open. It was a conversation between Emily and a divorce attorney. The email was recent, less than 2 weeks old. She was inquiring about the process of divorce, asking about division of assets, spousal support, and whether she could retain full control of certain properties. My properties. Our properties. She even mentioned that I probably wouldn't put up much of a fight since I was soft-hearted. The words stung worse than any argument could. She was planning to take everything from me quietly. I sat there frozen, my world shifting underneath me. The woman I trusted was preparing to dismantle my life without a word. No confrontation, no discussion, just cold strategy. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled. I kissed her on the cheek. I asked about her upcoming week. She answered easily, like she wasn't planning to rip the foundation of our lives apart. That was when I made my decision. If she was planning a silent ambush, I wasn't going to wait around helplessly. I contacted my old college friend, Michael, a corporate attorney. Michael was sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. I explained the situation in careful detail, showing him the emails and financials. He listened silently, his face expressionless, but I could see the calculations behind his eyes. When do you think she'll file? He asked. 2 weeks. Maybe less, I answered. Then we don't have much time, he said. We'll need to restructure everything now. Quietly, Michael helped me create a plan. We moved my personal savings into protected accounts. I quietly restructured the ownership of my business assets. We prepared trusts and protections Emily wouldn't expect. All legally sound, all entirely above board, but bulletproof. The whole time, I kept playing the role of the clueless husband. I smiled. I cooked her favorite meals. I asked about her day. I even bought her flowers on a random Wednesday evening, just to keep up the illusion. But inside, the distance between us grew colder than I had ever imagined possible. Then, exactly 2 weeks later, it happened. I came home early from work. Emily was sitting at the kitchen island, dressed sharply, waiting for me like she had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror 100 times. Her lawyer was seated beside her. I looked at them both, my face calm, my heart like stone. Daniel, she began softly. We need to talk. I sat down slowly across from them, making sure my breathing stayed even. My hands rested calmly on the table, but beneath the surface, my chest was tight. Emily's voice was soft, rehearsed, almost sympathetic. Daniel, I've been thinking about this for a while. I didn't want it to come to this, but I believe it's for the best, for both of us. Her lawyer, a well-dressed man with perfectly combed silver hair, nodded professionally but said nothing. His briefcase sat open, filled with neatly stacked papers. Divorce papers. I looked at her. My wife. The woman I built my life with. And yet, now she sat there, ending everything like it was a simple business transaction. I see, I said quietly. She glanced at her attorney, who took it as his cue. We've drawn up a fair and reasonable settlement, he began, sliding the papers toward me. Emily is willing to waive any future claims in exchange for retaining the house, the vehicles, and a majority share of the financial accounts. It was surgical, ruthless. Everything she thought she could take, laid out on that stack of documents. I skimmed through the pages, pretending to process them for the first time. Assets division, custody clauses, property claims. My name sat beside columns that suggested I would walk away with almost nothing. And all the while, Emily watched me carefully. Waiting for the soft-hearted fool she thought she married to simply nod and sign. I set the papers down gently. Emily, is this really what you want? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Yes, I believe it's best. I nodded slowly. Her lawyer smiled, as if relieved at my supposed compliance. Excellent. If you agree to these terms, we can finalize everything quickly and quietly. No need for a long, painful court process. I leaned back in my chair. I remembered Michael's words in my ear just days earlier. Let them show their hand first. Don't tip your cards. Let her believe she's in control. I folded my hands on the table. I'll have my attorney review it. Emily's face twitched barely. This wasn't the response she expected. Daniel, please, there's no need to complicate things. Her voice was still calm, but now coated with an edge of frustration. Her confidence faltered just slightly. Emily, I said, keeping my voice even, we've been married 10 years. You deserve fairness, and so do I. That's all. Her lawyer jumped back in. Of course. But time is of the essence, Mr. Porter. The longer this drags on, the more emotionally taxing it will become. I smiled politely. I'll get back to you soon. And I stood up. Emily's eyes followed me, searching for a sign that her plan was still unfolding the way she wanted. But I offered her nothing. No emotion, no anger, no argument. Just quiet control. That night, I didn't sleep again. Michael and I reviewed the documents together in his office. She thought you'd panic, he said, flipping through the pages. But she didn't anticipate what we already set up. The house, already moved into my family trust. The financial accounts, shielded under legally binding structures. My business, untouchable. Everything she thought she could seize was now protected. Michael smiled grimly. She's not walking away with much. She just doesn't know it yet. 2 days later, her attorney received my response. A formal rejection of her settlement, along with a full counterproposal reflecting the true legal standing of our shared assets. The silence after that was loud. Days went by, then a week. Emily grew distant again, but now there was tension in her every movement. She knew something had slipped. She wasn't in full control anymore, and she could feel it. One evening, as we sat silently in the living room, she finally broke. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I looked at her. Am I? Or did you just underestimate me? Her face flushed. You think you're so clever, she snapped, her mask finally cracking. You think I haven't seen how you're moving everything around. But I have friends too, Daniel. I raised an eyebrow. Friends? Or someone you've been seeing behind my back? She froze. For a split second, the color drained from her face. There it was. The first truth slipping out. I leaned in, my voice cold. I wasn't blind, Emily. I was patient. For the first time in months, she had nothing to say. The house was heavy with silence. And then, without another word, she stood and walked out of the room. The days after our confrontation felt different. Tense. Like we were both playing a game of chess where every move could decide everything. Emily avoided me. I avoided her. But inside, my mind was racing. Her slip that night haunted me. I have friends too. Not lawyers. Not financial advisors. Friends. And when I said someone you've been seeing behind my back, the way her face dropped, that was the moment everything changed for me. I no longer suspected, I knew. It wasn't just divorce she was planning. She was preparing to leave me for someone else. The house had turned into a cold battlefield. We barely spoke. Meals were quiet. The fake civility was gone. Every word felt loaded. Michael called me one afternoon. His voice was calm but urgent. "Daniel, you need to see this." He forwarded me documents his private investigator had gathered over the past week. Photos, phone records, hotel reservations. There he was. His name was Marcus, one of Emily's co-workers, a regional VP who had transferred to her office a year ago. In the photos, they were together at restaurants, in hotel lobbies, even leaving the same conference where Emily had told me she was too busy to come home that weekend. It wasn't just an affair. It had been going on for over a year. The pieces fit now. The late nights, the client meetings, the secret phone calls. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was calculated, layered, and while she smiled at me each morning, she was slowly dismantling our marriage behind closed doors. Michael's investigator had even found messages where Marcus was coaching her through the divorce, encouraging her to take what she deserves, and reminding her that Daniel is weak. "He won't fight you." I stared at the screen, feeling a cold, steady anger rise inside me. Not rage, something heavier, something sharper. Marcus thought I was weak. Emily thought I was blind. Neither of them knew me at all. That night, Emily came home late again. Her heels clicked across the tile as she entered the kitchen. "Working late again?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She paused for a moment. "Yes, it was a rough day." I nodded slowly, pretending I believed her. "Must be exhausting having to carry so many secrets," I added quietly. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met her gaze and held it. "You're not as careful as you think you are, Emily." She crossed her arms, trying to regain control. "You're paranoid." I smiled softly. "Am I?" For a moment, she said nothing. Her confidence was cracking. "Daniel, don't make this uglier than it needs to be." Her words were familiar now. She kept using them, trying to guilt me into surrendering, into being the fool she counted on. But I wasn't that man anymore. "I'm not making it ugly. You already did that." Her lip trembled slightly before she turned away, grabbing her bag and walking up the stairs. I stood there for a long time after she was gone. I could feel the shift. The advantage I had quietly taken was starting to weigh on her. She was losing the control she thought she held. The next day, her attorney called Michael. They wanted to reopen negotiations. Suddenly, they were willing to be flexible, but it was too late for that. We had evidence now, enough to challenge her entire claim in court. Infidelity, premeditated asset manipulation, hidden intentions. And under our state laws, those facts would change everything. Michael smiled as we reviewed the new documents they submitted. "They're getting nervous. This is where they start breaking, Daniel. Just keep your composure." That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, remembering the woman I married, the promises we made, the quiet nights spent dreaming of our future. And now here we were, enemies in the same house. Two lives drifting further apart, with every secret exposed. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. 2 weeks later, the court date arrived. The room was colder than I expected, not because of the temperature, but because of the weight in the air. Emily sat across from me with her attorney. She looked polished, controlled. She wore that same mask I had grown familiar with, the carefully constructed version of herself that she hoped the court would see. I sat with Michael at my side, calm, steady. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Her attorney opened with practiced sympathy, painting Emily as a devoted wife who simply wanted a fair settlement after years of imbalance in our marriage. They spoke about sacrifices she had made, about how she contributed emotionally even if not financially. They presented the picture of a woman who had patiently endured while I supposedly pursued my career without regard for her needs. I listened quietly. Michael whispered, "They're laying it on thick. Don't react." Then it was our turn. Michael stood and delivered our case with surgical precision. The prenuptial agreements, the trust structures, the legal asset protections we had prepared, all presented professionally, unemotionally. But then came the pivot. Michael placed a thick folder on the judge's bench. "Your Honor, we also present compelling evidence of infidelity, conspiracy to manipulate assets prior to filing, and willful deceit during the marriage. Emily's face went pale for the first time. Her attorney shifted uncomfortably but tried to object, arguing irrelevance, but the judge allowed the evidence to be submitted. The photographs, the hotel records, the messages between Emily and Marcus, all laid out in black and white. The room was heavy with silence as the judge flipped through the pages. Emily wouldn't meet my eyes. Her entire strategy was unraveling right there in front of her. The judge's voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Porter, are you prepared to respond to these allegations under oath?" Her attorney leaned over and whispered furiously into her ear. I could see her hands trembling now. I need a moment," she finally stammered. We took a recess. In the hallway outside, Michael turned to me. She didn't expect this to go public. Her image was everything. She was counting on your silence. I nodded. I know, and I didn't know. Emily had always cared about appearances more than anything. Her job, her family, her friends. She needed to be seen as perfect. The idea that her affair, her betrayal, and her manipulation could be exposed terrified her far more than any financial loss. When we returned to the courtroom, her tone had changed. Her lawyer spoke again. "Your Honor, we'd like to request mediation to renegotiate terms amicably." It was her white flag. The judge agreed and scheduled a private mediation session. Later that evening, back at the house, Emily finally spoke. Real words, not rehearsed ones. She stood in the kitchen while I poured myself a glass of water. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly, her voice cracking. I stared at her for a moment before answering. "Doing what? Protecting myself? Or forcing you to face what you've done?" Her eyes glistened with something between anger and guilt. "You were never supposed to find out like this." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "No, I was never supposed to find out all. You wanted me blind. You wanted me weak." Tears formed in her eyes now, but I didn't move. I couldn't feel sympathy, not yet. Not after everything. I made mistakes, Daniel, but you're destroying me. "No, Emily, y whispered coldly. You did that to yourself." And with that, I left her standing there, broken, while I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. That night, I knew the end was near, but the reckoning had only just begun. The mediation began the next morning. We sat in a private conference room, just the four of us, Emily, her lawyer, Michael, and me. The mediator, a calm older man with years of experience, opened the session. I could see the strain on Emily's face now. She hadn't slept. The shadows under her eyes revealed the cracks forming in her carefully controlled exterior. Her lawyer spoke first, his voice low and cautious. We believed both parties would benefit from avoiding further litigation. Michael simply nodded and slid our proposal across the table. The mediator reviewed it carefully, speaking in a gentle voice. This proposal preserves each party's respective legal rights, taking into account the substantial evidence presented. Emily's eyes scanned the document. The house, awarded to me. The business, untouched. The financial accounts, fairly divided, but not the sweeping haul she had originally planned. The properties she thought she could quietly claim gone. And then there was the clause that hit her hardest, a public non-disclosure agreement. Any attempt to smear my name or share private details publicly would come with severe financial penalties. I could almost see the blood drain from her face. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering furiously. She bit her lip, breathing heavily. "Daniel," she finally whispered, "please, don't do this. Don't humiliate me." I held her gaze, my voice calm but cold. "You had every chance to stop this before it started." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't soften. Not yet. The months of lies, the calculated betrayal, it all led here. She signed. With trembling hands, she picked up the pen and signed each page. The mediator collected the documents and nodded. "We're done here." Michael placed a hand on my shoulder as we stood. "You handled this exactly as you needed to." Emily remained seated, staring blankly at the table. She didn't speak as I walked out of the room, but the story wasn't quite finished. 2 days later, Marcus showed his true colors. The investigator Michael had hired uncovered additional files, messages, and financial transfers. Marcus hadn't been supporting Emily out of love. He had been manipulating her, using promises of a future together to convince her to go after my assets, knowing he'd benefit from whatever she gained. Worse yet, Marcus was married himself. He never intended to leave his own wife. He was stringing Emily along, using her desperation, feeding her fantasy, pushing her deeper into destruction. When Emily discovered this, everything inside her seemed to collapse. One evening, she knocked on my door. I almost didn't open it, but after a long hesitation, I did. She stood there, disheveled, her eyes red from crying. The proud, calculated woman who once tried to dismantle my life was gone. Standing in her place was someone lost. Daniel, she whispered, her voice shaking. I didn't know he lied to me. I stayed silent. I thought he loved me. I thought if I just got through the divorce, we'd finally. She broke into tears, covering her face. I still said nothing. Finally, she looked up at me, her voice barely audible. I destroyed everything. And for what? For the first time in months, I allowed myself to speak softly. Not cold, not angry, just honest. You were willing to throw away everything we built, everything we shared for a lie. And you almost succeeded. Her tears ran freely now. She couldn't meet my eyes. I don't expect your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, she whispered. But I'm so sorry, Daniel. I stood there, feeling a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, exhaustion. She had broken me once. But now, watching her like this, she was already broken far beyond what I ever could have done to her. She destroyed herself. And yet, even then, part of me still grieved for the woman I married years ago, before all of this. Go home, Emily, I said softly. She nodded weakly and walked away. I closed the door, leaning against it. The storm was almost over, but the final reckoning still waited just ahead. Weeks passed. The divorce was finalized. The assets divided. The paperwork filed and sealed. Legally, it was over. But emotionally, I was still standing in the ruins of a life I once believed was unshakable. I had won, technically, yet winning never felt so hollow. Michael invited me out for drinks one evening. He looked at me with a concerned expression as we sat in the quiet corner of a downtown bar. You did everything right, Daniel, he said carefully. You protected yourself. You stood your ground. But I know you're carrying more than you're letting on. I sighed. I don't understand how we got here. He nodded, understanding. You didn't fail. She did. She made her choices. And now she's living with them. He was right. I knew it. But still, the weight lingered. I went home that night to a house that felt far too big and far too quiet. I walked through the rooms, passing photographs I hadn't taken down yet, smiling faces from a life that didn't exist anymore. Then came a phone call. It was Emily. I almost didn't answer, but something inside me told me to pick up. Hello. Her voice was small, fragile. Daniel, can we talk? I hesitated. Emily, what more is there to say? I need to apologize, she whispered. Not for the settlement, not for the divorce, but for what I became. Her voice trembled, barely holding back tears. I'll let my ambition consume me. I'll let Marcus manipulate me. I wanted more money, more status, more excitement. And in chasing that, I destroyed everything real. I remained silent. She continued. I thought taking from you would somehow make me stronger. But all I've done is lose. Marcus, he abandoned me the second things got complicated. His wife found out. He cut me off completely. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I lost my job last week. Her voice broke completely now. I lost everything, Daniel. And suddenly I felt it, the final weight lift off my chest. Not satisfaction, not revenge, clarity. You never had to lose any of it, Emily, I said softly. You had a life worth protecting. You had someone who loved you, but you chose to trade it all for an illusion. She sobbed quietly on the other end of the line. I know, she whispered. And then, the most unexpected words escaped my mouth. I forgive you. There was silence on both ends. Not because I wanted to erase what she had done, but because holding on to that bitterness any longer would only chain me to the past she destroyed. I'm not doing it for you, I added. I'm doing it for me. Through her tears, I heard the faintest whisper, Thank you. We ended the call, and that was the last time we spoke. Months later, I found peace in places I never expected. I rebuilt my business stronger than before. I traveled for the first time in years without carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. And slowly, piece by piece, I began to find myself again. In time, I even met someone new, someone genuine, someone who valued loyalty, not ambition. I realized that sometimes life doesn't break you to destroy you. It breaks you to rebuild you. The man I was before, the man Emily thought was weak, died the moment she handed me those papers. The man I became afterward, stronger, wiser, free, is the man standing here today. And as for Emily, she faded into her own silence. She became a story I no longer needed to carry. The past was finished, but my life, my real life, was finally just beginning. The end.